Good day, everyone. My name is Jaliana Gahisan, and together with my group mates Jasper Shama Balite, Luvel Bulalakaw, Alan Jane Sokong, and Jeric Langgam, we are tasked to report Chapter 10, Sharing the Earth's Resources. Now let us take a look at how the world is doing in sharing the earth's resources, because in a world of great wealth, there is still a multitudinous sum of people who are living in absolute poverty. Now this begs the question, how is the world sharing the earth's resources when there are still a large number of people who are not receiving the earth's resources? Now let's take a look at some evidences or examples as to how the world is sharing its resources. According to the Human Development Report in the year 2003 and other trusted resources indicates that of the total population of the world, which is 6 billion people, there are still 1.2 billion people who live on less than $1 a day. Imagine $1 a day in peso currency, or the Philippine currency, that is almost or at least 57 pesos. Then the cost of living in today's society, that is not enough to sustain the daily needs and daily lives of people. To think that people are living like this just goes to show that equitable distribution of wealth and resources is not very apparent in some areas of the world. Another is that 925 million people are undernourished or malnourished. Although it does not reach the 1 billion mark, it is still a very large number of people who are malnourished or who don't have enough resources or enough food to sustain the nutrients that their body needs. Another is that 114 million primary age children are not enrolled in learning facilities. Now, in a world that takes pride in education or puts importance in education, advocates for quality learning for the people in society, there are still a very large number, especially children, who aren't able to access learning facilities or learning institutions. Why is that? Here in the Philippines, there are still a large number of people or Filipinos who aren't or who can't afford to study. Even in the presence of free higher education, the cost of living is enough for them to decide to enter the workforce rather than study. So this goes to show that even when people are given free access to education, there are still many factors that play into how a person decides on whether to study or not. According to UN Millennium Project, 2.6 billion people, or almost half of the world's total population, do not have access to basic education. So what does this mean? In a world abundant of wealth and resources, there are still people who are struggling or who cannot access it. Especially in children or teenagers, it is very important for them to have education or even basic education, because in the quote that we believe in here in the Philippines, that the children are the hope of society, or ang kabataan ay ang pag-asa ng bayan. How can we become that hope when some or most aren't able to even start becoming that hope? Next is that more than 1 billion still using unsafe sources of drinking water. Now this is the very example of how the earth's resources are being distributed or being given or shared to the world. Especially in the rural areas of the world, there are still a large number of people who aren't given the same amount of resources than that of urban areas. So in this case, you can see that there is still discrimination, or that they don't put much importance in the health and well-being of people who are living in rural areas, and are focusing on giving those resources to modernized areas. There is still factors that play into this, such as like accessibility in those places, because rural areas tend to be very dangerous or difficult to get into. However, there's still a large number of instances where they still chose to prioritize modernized cities or urbanized cities than of rural areas. Next, more than 500,000 women die every year from pregnancy related causes. Pregnancy is not new to society or not new in the medical field and have created like a number of countermeasures to every possible outcome that could happen during a person's or a woman's pregnancy. Yet there are still many women who die during it. I think women dying from pregnancy when in fact it is a very known or it is a very studied case in the medical field. It just goes to show that it's not about the people's capabilities in helping other people. It's about the physical resources or the physical aspects that take away or one's right of living. According to UNICEF, 30,000 children aged 5 and below die each day due to poverty. That is about 210,000 children each week, or just under 11 million each year. They die quietly in some of the poorest villages on earth, far removed from the scrutiny and conscience of the world. Now let's take a look at the Philippine status in the early 20s. Now until today, the Philippines is a developing country, and it is apparent there is still a number of Filipinos who are living in absolute poverty. 4.7 million families, or 26.9% of the total population, were poor in 2006. Although it is not like half of the total population of the world, that is still a large number to consider on how those people are living during that time. 27.6 million individual Filipinos, or 32.9% of the total population, were poor in 2008. So in comparison to families and individuals, the individuals take a huge leap, from 26% to 32% of the total population. And that says a lot. How about those individuals who are not living with family or who don't have family to rely on? They are living with absolute poverty, or were living poor. How did they continue to live, or how did they live through that? Now, 18.1% of the Philippine population live below the national poverty line. From 26.9% and 32.9% to 18.1% now, currently in the year 2024, can say that it has reduced a lot. And 18% is still a large number. But seeing it reduce, gives us hope for the Philippines to actually escape poverty in the future. Now let us talk about what is national poverty line. National poverty line, it is the benchmark for estimating poverty indicators that are consistent with the country's specific economic and social circumstances. It reflects local perceptions of the level and composition of consumption or income needed to be non-poor. So in simple terms, national poverty line is like the standard at which people are categorized to be non-poor or poor. For example, in a specific country or a specific city, the national poverty line or the standard is, for example, 10,000 a month for your living expenses or your income. Yet you live, for example, 9,000 a month, then you are considered to be below the national poverty line. When you are living with, for example, 12,000 a month, you are categorized as non-poor or above the national poverty line. Next, let's talk about tragic map. The gap between the rich and the poor. Sad to say that the number of rich families here in the world is not even a percent to consider, in contrast to the poor families of the world. The combined wealth of the world's 200 richest people is $1 trillion, while the combined income of the 582 million people living in 43 least developing countries is 146 billion. The combined income of millions of people is not even enough to reach a trillion. Yet 200 people, not even 1,000 people who are considered the richest, their combined income reaches 1 trillion. Comparing that, 200 katawo. I-compare na nimo sa millions of people, yet sila mas dato pa jud sila kaysa sa ila ang i-combine. That is the tragic gap, or the gap between the rich and the poor in society. Now let's take a look at the tragic gap here in the Philippines, especially in Sulu and Metro Manila. The poverty in Sulu is 88.8%. That is more than half of the total population of Sulu who are living in poverty. In Metro Manila, there are only 4.3% who are living in poverty. Life expectancy at birth. In Sulu, the life expectancy is 52.33 years or 52 years. And in Metro Manila, there is 69.2 or 69 years. Next is high school graduates. 18.1% in Sulu and 74.3% in Metro Manila. A situation where huge numbers of people drown in the cauldron of misery while few take pleasure in having a plethora of material choices is a state of violence. Now let's talk about violence in sharing the earth's resources. So what is structural violence? It refers to the systems, institutions, and policies that meet some people's needs, rights, or wants at the expense of others. For example, you were able to take a position with high salary, yet the process that you took to get there was through the backer system. He had a backer. Now, to the person who was higher in ranking that you was not able to take that position because you had a backer, and that is meeting the human needs of people at the expense of others. Nanindot imong kinabuhi pero napud kay gitapakan nga lain. So that is structural violence. Hunger and poverty are some symptoms of this violence. Why? Because there shouldn't be hunger or poverty if the earth's resources was given or was shared properly or fairly to the people of the world. The saying the rich becomes richer and the poor becomes poorer is very present in society. Being rich, you don't have limitations into becoming richer. But being poor, you have a limitation into becoming not poor or going above the national poverty line. As being poor, you don't have the limitation of becoming poorer. That is the difference between the rich and the poor.
And now let's proceed to our next topic, which is the other causes of poverty. So we know that poverty is a complex and multi-faced issue that affects millions of people. So in this topic, we will delve into the various causes of poverty. Since we know that there is a lot causes of poverty, and one of that is the war. So how does war cause poverty? So war drains resources. It also disrupts trades, destroys infrastructures, and causes displacement, which leads to poverty by reducing investment in vital sectors, hindering economic activity, and straining resources in affected areas. So that is how war causes poverty. So next, let's proceed to the other cause of poverty, which is the political and economic system. So political and economic system can also contribute to poverty, since corrupt governments may misallocate resources, leading to inefficient and favoritism rather than equitable distribution. Additionally, oppressive regimes can suppress dissent and limit opportunities for economic growth and social mobility. Inadequate regulation and lack of access to markets can stifle entrepreneurship and innovation, which perpetuates poverty. Furthermore, economic systems can profit prioritize profit over social welfare may exacerbate inequality and marginalize vulnerable population, deepening poverty. Now let's proceed to the next cause of poverty, which is the inequitable distribution of wealth and resources. Since when wealth and resources are concentrated in the hands of a few, it limits opportunities for others to access education, healthcare, and economic development. This disparity can result from factors such as unequal access to education, discriminatory employment practices, and policies that favor the wealthy. As a result, marginalized communities face barriers to improving their socioeconomic status, perpetuating cycles of poverty. So how are you going to address this kind of issue that affects or causes poverty? So, in addressing inequitable distribution, it requires policies that promote fair taxation, equitable access to resources, and opportunities for economic empowerment for all individuals and communities. Environmental conditions can also contribute or cause poverty because natural disasters like floods, droughts, and hurricanes can destroy homes, crops, and livelihoods, leaving people without the means to support themselves. And also, environmental degradation such as deforestation and soil erosion can reduce agricultural productivity, making it harder for communities to feed themselves and earn a living. Additionally, pollution and poor sanitation can lead to health problems, increasing medical expenses and reducing productivities. So how are you going to address these issues that cause poverty? So to address it, it requires sustainable development practices, investment in resilient infrastructures, and policies that helps protect the natural resources and promote environmental stewardship. And now we're done with the environmental condition. Let us proceed to the overutilization of resources, that also one factor that causes the poverty. So overutilization of resources such as forests and fisheries diminish the availability of essential assets for communities, impacting their ability to sustain livelihoods through activities like agriculture and fishing. This depletion results in reduced income opportunities and food sources, exacerbating poverty, particularly in areas where people depend heavily on these resources. Additionally, environmental degradation stemming from overutilization can lead to health problems and disrupt ecosystems, further diminishing available resources and perpetuating poverty, especially among vulnerable population with limited access to alternative sources of income.
The promise of economic globalization. According to Stiglitz 2007, economic globalization refers to the economic integration of the world's countries through the increased flow of goods and services, capital and labor. So economic globalization is like when countries all around the world start working together more closely in terms of buying and selling stuff, moving money around, and having people work in different countries. Next are the benefits of economic globalization. First is the promotion of economic efficiency and the expansion of opportunities for growth and development thereby reducing poverty and inequity and enhancing human development and security. Think of economic globalization like a big puzzle where countries trade with each other, move money around, and people work in different places. The good parts of these puzzles are that it helps things run smoothly, like making sure products get to where they needed and making it easier for countries to grow and develop. This growth can help lift people out of poverty, make things more fair, and make life better for everyone by improving things like education, healthcare, and safety. So, economic globalization can be good because it makes things work better and gives more opportunities for everyone to do well. So, these benefits was not realized because of the unfair rules of the game set by the rich countries that own the transnational corporation and dominate the international financial institutions. Such rules were designed to work to their advantage. So the benefits of the economic globalization didn't quite work out that way. The big problem is that the rich countries, especially the ones with big companies that work all over the world, made the rules to favor themselves. So, they ended up getting even richer while the poorer countries didn't get as much benefit.
Economic globalization. Economic globalization has also overemphasized the material more than ends that matter, such as human rights, development, equity, inclusion, human security, and the environment. Economic globalization has also refers to the interconnectedness and interdependence of economies worldwide. It involves integration of national economies to international economies through trade, investment, and exchanging of ideas and technologies.
So now let's move on to demystifying myths about poverty. It is often thought that poverty is caused by scarce resources, overpopulation, or laziness. So together, let us delve into this in order for us to have a clear understanding of what really causes poverty and what poverty really is, while we demystify the myths about it. So, according to the Institute for Food and Development Policy 1998, asserts that there is enough grain grown worldwide to provide every person with 3,500 calories each day and enough food to provide at least 4.3 pounds of food per person a day worldwide. So, let's talk about the first myth, which is poverty is caused by scarce resources. So, while scarcity of resources makakos man siya poverty in some contexts, but it's really not the primary cause. So, daghan pa kayong mga resource-rich countries that are still struggling with the high levels of poverty due to factors that we have mentioned earlier, like katong corruption, lack of economic opportunities, lack of access to education, inequitable distribution of wealth, and etc. A lot more. So basically, poverty is not about the scarcity of resources, because even in the state of abundance of resources, countries are still struggling. A lot are still struggling. So basically, poverty is often more about how the resources are managed and distributed. So now let's move on to our next myth, which is poverty is caused by overpopulation. So overpopulation is really not the root cause of poverty. In fact, many densely populated countries are experiencing significant economic growth. So as you can see on the screen, an example there is China. It is one of the most populated countries, and yet they are one of the most advanced. So basically, overpopulation does not reduce productivity, nor it does automatically cause poverty. So here's why. I have two factors. First, we have the human resource. So it means kung daghang tao, mas daghang potential workers. And with that, mas mo increase ang productivity, innovation, or like an overall economic output, which as kani sila are key drivers for prosperity. Ikaduha, consumer demand. So a larger population means a larger consumer base. So with that, there's an increased demand for goods and services. And this can stimulate economic growth. So maka-encourage na siya sa mga business na mo expand o mo invest. So, mo increase ang productivity and more job opportunities. However, it's essential still na i-recognize na to na overpopulation can strain resources and infrastructure if dili gyud siya ma-manage effectively. So, sustainable development strategies like including investment in education, healthcare, and infrastructure, and resource management are crucial para ma-harness na to ang potential of a growing population without causing harm sa atong environment or without causing poverty. So now onto our last myth, which is poverty is caused by laziness. So this myth is not only false, but also harmful as it perpetuates stereotypes and blame towards individuals that are experiencing poverty. So in reality, many people living in poverty are working multiple jobs just to meet their needs. So as you can see on the screen, it states there that farmers, fisher folk, and laborers, among other workers, work very hard and for long hours to survive, yet they are still on the list of the world's poor. So why? They are not lazy, but they are experiencing poverty. So here's why. So structural barriers, katong lack access to quality education, discrimination, economic inequality, and systemic injustice. These are the factors, or these are the things that plays more a significant role in causing poverty rather than individuals' laziness. So ang poverty is resulta yun ni siya sa mga systemic issues that are beyond sa control sa usa ka tawo rather than sa lack of effort or motivation sa usa ka tawo na motrabaho.
Challenging economic inequity. Global. Establish a new international and political economic order that is fair. Wealthy countries should open up their markets to the poor countries without conditionality. Developed countries should provide unconditional debt relief as it is the foreign debt burden that compels most developing countries to reduce allocation for basic social and economic services. Assistance given to developing nations should be in the form of grants without conditions that further push the country in the bottom of the poverty could run rich countries should open access to technologies as technology helps propel development. Reduce military expenditures so that more resources would be made available for basic services and productive activities. National. A genuine and comprehensive agrarian reform program should be implemented. Government should subsidy increase for education, which helps even in the playing field. Government and private lending institutions should institute credit reforms that will support small and medium-scale entrepreneurs. Government should provide training skills programs such as livelihood and marketing. Progressive taxation reform should be instituted to increase the purchasing power of the poor. Rural infrastructure such as farm-to-market roads and drying facilities for harvest should be developed. And lastly, the government should make itself more accessible and visible to the people through decentralization.